keep awake. Please be seated. Throughout my first semester in college, every few days I would return to the same spot. A little clearing tucked back in the woods, at the end of a dirt road, down a fire lane, and down a short trail. It was this open space, maybe 30 feet wide, 30 feet long. It was a clearing with a wide rock and sandy, exposed soils, and a patch of some tall grasses growing up. It felt different than the surrounding woods, and it became this place of solace and refuge for me. My visitations to the clearing began with a class assignment. I took a course called Walking the Land, which was everything as wonderful as it sounds. It was all focused on developing an appreciation for the subtle changes in a landscape, of learning how to read a particular piece of land and come to know it. We explored it through literature and natural history, geology, botany, etc. And part of the course was to find a spot to go back to week in and week out. And what started as a class assignment became some much-needed refuge and solace for me. Managing the new demands and expectations, the workload of being a first-year college student, navigating new relationships and friendships, new expectations, living outside of my parents' house for the first time. I found that I needed a space to put everything down, to simply be, to pay attention to the world around me, to get out of my head, even if just for a few moments. Over time, I came to appreciate this clearing and the subtle changes in it from one day to the next, one week to the next. The green grasses that flourished when I was there eventually turned tan, then brown. The leaves on the trees first burst in red and yellow, fading to brown and eventually falling down. The animal activity changed from the hum of cicadas in the height of summer, the changing birds over time, to the scurry of chipmunks and squirrels preparing for the winter. The sound of acorns pelting against a leaf litter. I went out to the clearing one November day, expecting to see more of those small changes. But what I experienced was something very different. It was a chilly day. I walked down the path, found my way to my usual spot where I would sit, and I looked out at the line of trees. I settled into the quiet, the wind rustling the leaves, the smell of tannins rising from the leaf litter below. And suddenly a crashing sound, like some animal running at full speed, and I saw a flash of brown and white, a white-tailed deer bolting just beyond the initial line of trees. But the sound continued. And just as quick as the white-tailed deer passed by my field of vision, I saw a shape emerge into the clearing. A coyote. In the middle of a chase, trying to cut off the deer by cutting through the clearing. And as soon as it emerged, it stopped. It sensed my presence. It turned its head towards me. We locked eyes. It felt like a little eternity in that moment. Like I'd stumbled onto some secret ritual going on in the middle of the woods, and all the participants suddenly realized there was an interloper. It couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 seconds that this coyote stopped there, but it felt like ages of seeing this creature in the midst of something so primal, so elemental, so fundamental to its life and being. And as quick as it came into my field of vision, the coyote turned and ran back off after the deer. Never saw it again. In that experience of that clearing, what I expected was this incremental change. What I got was something so sudden, abrupt, unexpected. And it's stuck with me to this day, one of those visceral memories that I can recall in an instant. In our gospel reading today, from the Gospel of Mark, we get another apocalyptic vision in a series that we've read for the last few weeks. This one is called the Little Apocalypse of Mark's Gospel, all about the destruction of the temple and the coming of the Son of Man. And it begins with this sort of cataclysmic vision of the sun being blotted out and the moon giving out its light and the stars falling from the sky. But then when we get after it are these two contrasting visions. And often what the purpose that these apocalyptic visions serve in the gospel, or in all of Scripture, is to do two things. One of them is to tell us how God comes to us. It's a vision of how God makes God's self known to the world and to all who follow God. And the other function of it is to inform the disciples, the people of God, how to live their lives in the meantime, until that vision is one day realized. And as Jesus is doing this, presenting how it is that God comes to us and how we ought to live in the meantime, he uses these two images that at first can seem kind of contradictory. The first is to learn the lesson of the fig tree. When its branches become tender and it puts forth its leaves, that you know that summer is near. It's a vision, it's an image of that incremental change. The plant, the tree putting on bud, that bud opening up into a leaf, that leaf flourishing, blossoming out, heralding the summer that is to come. It is something regular and expected, a process that happens year after year, season after season. And then, suddenly, we get another image. A man has gone on a journey, leaving his servants with their tasks, telling the doorkeeper to wait at the door. And the doorkeeper knows not whether he will return at evening or at midnight or at cockcrow or at dawn. It's an image of unexpected arrival, the sudden appearance of the householder or the sudden appearance of God. On one hand, you have the incremental ways, the small ways that God is present within our lives and all around us. And on another, you have the sudden appearance of God, like the master coming back to the house and knocking at the door, or a coyote bursting into the clearing. But in these two images, we have a multiplicity of the ways that God comes into our lives and into the world. Like sitting in that clearing, seeing the slow change over time, and then suddenly having this vision of a creature emerging into it unexpected. So God comes to us often in the expected ways. And we gather together here every Sunday morning to draw closer to God in prayer, in the sharing of Eucharist, in our time together as a community, in lifting one another up in prayer, in fellowship, in community, through our conversation, through our being together, through our sacramental life. In all of these ways, God shows up. God is there in these rituals, God is there in the prayers, God is there in our Eucharist, God is there in baptism. And then there are moments of sudden, unexpected revelation, when God makes God's self known powerfully, unexpectedly, seemingly out of nowhere. And those appearances can come in different times and in different ways. Maybe it's a sudden joy, finding out you've gotten a job that you really hoped for, or feeling a sudden pull towards a new ministry. Or maybe it's in the diagnosis that a friend has received, getting to be there with them, supporting them, caring for them, loving them. Or God appears in the death of a loved one, of a family member. We never know what those moments are going to be through which God can reveal God's self. Moments of joy or sorrow, laughter or pain. What holds both of these images together, the incremental revelation of God in the fig leaf emerging to herald the summer, and in the sudden appearance of the householder, is what Jesus tells the disciples to do in the meantime. To keep awake, to pay attention, to notice the subtle shifts in yourself, in the people close to you, and in the world around you. Pay attention to the subtle movements of God's Spirit in your own heart and in the world. And be ready for those moments that'll upend everything. We don't know when they will come or what they will be, but all we can do is to prepare our heart to be open to receiving God speaking in them and through them. That work of preparation, of anticipation, of paying attention to our own hearts, the people around us in the world. That is what Advent is all about. It's a season of preparation for the coming of Christmas, but also of the unexpected ways that God will show up again to us and to the world. I think that preparation or that work of paying attention can look a lot of different ways. And it's almost certainly not about adding more to your to-do list. There is enough to do, enough tasks, enough to check off in this season, enough events to attend, enough presents to buy. There's enough stuff, enough things, enough tasks. And often this work of preparation, of anticipation, of paying attention is about stripping things away, about putting some of the anxiety and worry about getting everything done down, about taking some moments of silence, which is a hard practice. I know that I want to fill every moment that isn't filled with doing something else, with the Spotify Pop Christmas playlist, or thinking about another present that I could get, wondering what it is that Nicole might need or want. I could fill every single moment with more, with doing more. But what this gospel calls us to do is to pare some of that back, to keep awake, to keep alert, to pay attention to what is going on in our own hearts, the ways that God is seeking to reach out to us and to draw us closer, the ways that God is revealing God's self to us. And I know for me that often requires some quiet, some silence. And so my invitation to you this Advent, and more important, probably for my sake, more importantly for me, my invitation to myself is to take some time for silence. And so each of the next 3 Wednesdays, I'm going to be here in this room, sitting in mostly silent prayer for about 30 minutes. I'll open us in some spoken prayer, lead us into some silence with a little reflection, but mostly it's a chance to be quiet, to do a little bit less, to be rather than to do, and to pay attention to how God is stirring in our hearts, in this community, and the world around us. So let us keep awake. Let us pay attention to how the fig leaf is putting on its leaves, to the subtle movement, subtle changes in the trees, the edge of the clearing. And let us pay attention to the ways that God is seeking to break into our lives like a coyote charging into a clearing. I tell this to you and to all.